Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on data virtualization and our product Conduit. I just want to say before I start that at Blueprint, we don't typically do a ton of webinars, mainly because we believe in building deeper relationships and good experiences with our clients. But this past month, we've just gotten a flurry of activity and inquiries around data virtualization. So we figured we can take this opportunity to record some information and present a more robust deck on how Conduit and data virtualization works so people can learn on their own. So with that said, we'll get started and jump straight into the agenda. So first, we'll cover like what is data virtualization. There's a couple of folks that we've talked to, and when they first reached out to us, they thought that data virtualization, data visualization was similar. So we'll dispel some of those myths. We'll talk about the benefits and capabilities, and then I'll share use cases and success stories of companies that we've been working with. So what is data virtualization? You can look up the definition in Wikipedia, and it'll say something along the lines of being able to connect to multiple data sources and unify them in one view. And that is, I think, probably the best and easiest way to describe it. But a couple of other things that we found unique to this capability in the industry is that data virtualization enables you to use a virtual environment or a virtual machine to connect to really disparate large data sets without being bound to the limitations of your desktop. So for example, I'm sure folks have used Excel and have tried to open up or import, data into Excel, and then you run into limitations for how big of a data set you can work with. Or if, let's say, you want to connect to several different types of data and be able to do a join between different formats. Data virtualization virtualizes data all in one view. So it allows you to connect to, manipulate different data sets in real time. So we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about the use cases. And then lastly, the cool thing about virtualizing data is that you don't actually make duplicate copies. So if you're familiar with like ETLs or sandboxes and jobs that make presentable copies of data to analysts and users, virtualization does not do that. It bypasses that. It just gets you to the data much faster, easier, and to a certain extent cheaper way. No imports. And the cool thing about using virtualization technology is that for folks that are familiar with having to write select statements to look and explore data, you can just use Power BI or Tableau or QuickSight Look or any of those visualization tools to get to it. And as a result of all that, it helps IT departments save a lot of time and resources. So the example that I'd give, the easiest way to explain it is, let's say you want to build a dashboard in Power BI or any visualization tool that connects to, let's say, Microsoft SQL data that sits in AWS, maybe Elasticsearch that's in Azure, and then let's say your OData connection is coming out of some type of DevOps table. With data virtualization, you can connect all those sources in real time, build your joins and your dashboards inside of Power BI. And when you hit refresh on that dashboard, it is reading and pulling data from those source systems and transposing them and updating your dashboard. So it's really cool. Okay, so some of the benefits. One of the things we keep hearing from folks that are familiar with the industry is that they say we can't afford to keep doing ETLs, and we'll go into that in more detail when we go through one of the use cases. But lots of different departments asking for custom views, access, and it's taking too much time and costing what we believe to be strapped IT departments too much resources and money to be able to provide this service. And so in the IT software world, there's always a hack around these problems. And you can think of data virtualization as one of these ideas. Also, use Power BI or Tableau to directly analyze large data sets once. So as I mentioned just a second ago, you don't need to write code, right? You can use a tool like Power BI or Tableau and explore, do a join, and you can do it at scale. So this is where the VMs come in. You can scale up and scale out. And because you're in direct query or live connect mode, your VM that you're attached to is the horsepower running your query and those capabilities. So instead of hitting run and then waiting for that icon to spin and spin and spin to bring your data back, because you're bound by the horsepower of the machine you're working on, in a virtual environment you get to strap whatever VMs you want, and your data comes back to you a lot faster. So and then because you're hooked into these source systems in real time, you can see data in real time. So all in all, really cool technology. And then I mentioned earlier, virtualization is not visualization, which it sometimes gets mistaken for. I'm sure by now you guys know visualization is the ability to visualize data. So taking raw data and building graphs, charts, and stories with it. Virtualization is being able to expose data of different formats and living in different environments in one unified view, so a tool can analyze it and do something with it. So with that said, Conduit, like, what is unique about our product that kind of separates itself from the rest of the data virtualization category? First is Conduit's built off of Spark, and inside of Conduit, there is a query engine. And that query engine uses a combination of optimized Spark technology as well as a GPU query engine that's built off the Rapids platform. So without getting super nerdy about how it chops up and sends queries out, I can say is that it's because you leverage these two capabilities and technologies, it figures out a way to run queries, super complex queries, as fast as we know how right now. So that's one thing that's unique about Conduit. Number two, I don't know if schematize is a word, but essentially we've built in a capability that allows Conduit to explode and flatten NoSQL non-relational data. So it makes it really fast and easy to be able to analyze and run count distincts on. And so for folks that have worked with JSON data, especially on the aggregation side, you know that this has been challenging. So we built some technology native to Conduit that fixes that problem. Conduit also has Active Directory incorporated into it. And what that means is if you use groups to be able to assign permissions and viewing capabilities to within data sets, those groups from Active Directory transfer over into Conduit. So let's say finance can only see finance data, and HR is the only team or group that can see compensation, salary data, right? And finance can't. Those groups, when you're in Conduit and you're the IT admin creating connectors and views for different teams, those groups transfer right over. So if marketing reaches out and says, "Hey, I need access and help to this table because I want to do some segmentation analysis," well, inside of Conduit, you can assign marketing group to a specific view where marketing can only see marketing data. So it really makes managing the security and permissions and authorization around data sets a lot easier and cleaner. And lastly, because it leverages virtualization technologies and a lot of connectors and ways to transform data, you can do what we call a multi-cloud hybrid join. And that is, if you've got a data set sitting in one cloud, a data set sitting in on-prem, and a data set sitting in a different cloud, you could conceivably in real time do a join between all those data sets. And your Power BI or Tableau tool wouldn't know where they lived, where those data sets were, and wouldn't know that they're of different formats. It would think they're all just one format. So, and I'll explain that in a use case in more detail. So the first use case that we'll go into is an automotive manufacturer. So one of the largest in the world. They hired an IT firm to help consolidate their dealerships data. So you think about, and this is for Europe. So you think about all the data that is housed at a car dealership. You've got sales data, inventory, parts, service, customer data, all kinds of different data. And dealerships are independently operated, and there was just a hodgepodge of different types of data that needed to be consolidated because this automotive manufacturer at HQ wanted to create dashboards and views in near real time, so leadership can see different regions and geographies performance, be it inventory or sales, and performance leaders, so on and so forth. So you think of these legacy dealerships that have gone out and purchased different types of inventory management software from different companies. There's all kinds of different data sources. So one of the things that the IT firm did was they decided to go take all of this data and basically dump it into Elasticsearch in JSON files. And the cool thing about Elasticsearch is that it's got some really awesome cataloging capabilities that allow you to drill down and identify a metric or a set of metrics really, really fast, right? No matter how big that data set is. And so it makes sense that that's what you would use. So they built hooks into all these different databases, did extracts at different times, and you had this Elasticsearch database going. Everything was done in JSON, and they had a couple of dashboards that were built, and it showed sales performance. It was awesome. Well, then the automotive manufacturer went to this company and said, okay, that's really cool. Now I want to be able to do inventory forecasting and customer segmentation analysis off of that data. And if you know anything about how NoSQL JSON data works, that's becomes very challenging. So the first thing this company did was they went to Dremio, another company that has data virtualization technology, and asked Dremio if they had a way to virtualize and what they call explode or flatten out these JSON files so they became analyzable. I think that's where the words schematize came in. And Dremio said we could do it up to 2 nested layers. And some of these files were nested like 10 layers deep. So that didn't work. So then they found us, and we said we build the technology. So we did our research, and we said, you guys aren't the only ones that had this problem. Lots of folks write a lot of code to flatten out JSON documents. So we'll build this as a capability native to Conduit. So if anybody else in the future wants to query deeply nested JSON files, they can totally do that within Conduit. So we did it. And I think they had like terabytes of data that they could all of a sudden query at scale and get results back really fast. So so that technology is still running in their environment, and it was a pretty cool success story. Oh, and this deck will be shared with you guys after the call. So all the detailed notes on how it works, you'll have. So we'll start over in the next slide. All right, cool. So the next use case was an Austrian bank, and the head of their IT department reached out to us and basically said, these are the guys that said we can't keep doing ETLs because what's happening is their marketing department wanted to do customer segmentation, and they had purchased some third-party geospatial like demographic data at like a zip code level, and they wanted to run that against their customer database and see if geographically their customers over or under index certain metrics, so they'd be able to better optimize marketing and advertising spend. And the banking data, especially I think in Europe, has very tight regulations. So all their customer data sat in an on-prem Oracle database. and they had to build new sandboxes when requests came in that had unique security permissions and maintenance and testing that involved standing these things up, because as new customers came in, these tables be updated, and as customers left, they would be removed. And so there's a constant amount of maintenance that's required to operationalize these data sets for various departments. And then you add in the additional components. They went out and they got a bunch of other data. This data had to happen to sit in the cloud, and they had to join these two data sets together. And it's not an easy thing. So, and this practice, they told us, is becoming more and more common within their company, and even the banking industry is different departments, coming up with different data and wanting to do joins against their existing customer base. So so they've been researching data virtualization for a while, and we said absolutely. And not only that, is that because of Active Directory, we can integrate all these different departments groups, because they were already an Active Directory user, and it would just be really easy. And we got them up and running in less than a day. So they could do a join between this third-party data that's, I believe, is sat in Azure against their on-prem Oracle data. And it was anonymized, and marketing could not see other data sets within their on-prem Oracle database because they were permissioned just to see marketing data, and it worked pretty seamlessly. So another great success story. And then lastly, okay, so this is an interesting one. Before we said data virtualization, super helpful when we're talking about virtualizing large data sets, right? And in the software world, as the saying goes, like many different ways to skin a cat. So as long as you've got money, time, and effort, you can solve all kinds of problems. In this specific scenario, there was a really big company, probably a Fortune 10 company, that hired an IT vendor to build them a new compensation system. And as part of the MSA to go stand this project up, there was some language in there that leadership at this big company wanted to see tracking and progress along the way. And so there were two environments that this IT vendor was building their software in. One was outside the company's firewall, and one was inside their HR system, so inside their firewall. And in order to build a dashboard that gave leaders a view as to how they were doing, they needed data out of the client's Azure DevOps environment. And so what they did initially, because they didn't want any outside tools to hook past the firewall into their Azure DevOps tables, was they had a guy that had permission to log in to the client's Azure DevOps table, extract 3 fields out of an Azure DevOps table, dump it into Excel, and email it out to the guy that built the Power BI table. He would upload it into Power BI, and that's how they refreshed their dashboard. So clearly that was not in real time. It was like done every night. And so we said, you've given this guy access to these specific tables behind the firewall. Why don't we just impersonate his login, and we'll build a connector with you, and they'll hook into that data set, and then we can just use Conduit and leverage your existing Active Directory, because we know what this user's credentials are, and we'll just feed that data in real time into Power BI. Now, the reason why I say there's many different ways to skin a cat in this world is that what could have happened, and what typically happens, is you can get some dev resources and you can build some type of an FTP connection outside of your DevOps environment, and a job can run to go take that data set, send it out of the firewall, kind of like an auto email in a way, and go sit in that FTP environment, and then you can use your Power BI to hook directly into that table, and whatever cadence you want to set, go solve that problem that way. But that requires, again, time, money, and effort, and Conduit being installed in solves this problem in like minutes rather than hours and days. So and again, the client didn't want to go spend additional dev resources outside the budget that was allocated for this, and we got them hooked up and running in a matter of hours. So everything from the install to the connector build to the Power BI dashboard refresh, it was pretty quick, and they're pretty happy about it. So in a nutshell, it's a ton of information, short amount of time. Those are the use cases. And then next, I want to also talk about like how do we get into the space? How do we compete with the other folks? And what does our pricing look like? So spend a little bit of time on that. When we got our feet wet into the data virtualization space and started doing research, we interviewed a lot of folks that had experience with what we call the big guys, which would be like Denodo, Informatica, MuleSoft, and Dremio to a certain extent. And we found was there was a theme when it came to data virtualization technology. One was the incumbents in this industry charged a lot of money. Number two was because they were larger companies, the level of service and personalization and attention wasn't what the client liked. So a lot of like some implementation work got outsourced to vendors. If you want any additional services or training, you could get it, but everything costs, and you got to pay. And then there were certain unique features that IT departments still had to figure out ways to hack around. So we looked at these things and we said, we can probably build a better experience and a better product because we're newer. We can start from scratch. And we can be more with the times in terms of solving folks' problems. So without going and reading through all these bullet points and details, I can tell you that at a high level, where we designed this product, we wanted to, one, make the experience awesome. Everything from the implementation to the support. We set very aggressive SLAs for ourselves to be able to respond to folks in less than 24 hours. We don't charge for training configuration. If you need a connector built and you're not sure exactly how, we're more than happy to provide hands-on service and help you learn how to do it at no cost. We've built a lot of capabilities that we think are table stakes into this product and for the industry. So we support Postgres out of the box. Like I said about Active Directory, it's integrated, and we connect to Power BI natively, including direct query functionality. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about pricing. So a lot of companies in this space, we believe unreasonably tie their pricing to the size of the instance. And we thought that was, number one, it didn't make sense. And it's complicated, right? So we basically said, if you decided to go buy a small 4-core instance versus an 8-core instance, from our licensing perspective, like we don't spend any more money. So why would we charge you more? Because you want to run a data set at a query at a faster speed, so we should charge you more money? That doesn't make any sense. So we just kept our pricing flat, and you get everything that I just talked about all in one price. Even if you want to attach Conduit to like a Databricks cluster, and as long as it's one license, it's the same price. So yeah, I don't know if I got any more to say beyond that. We try to keep it as simple as we can. So anyhow, we covered a ton of information in a really short amount of time. And so we'll give you guys a few minutes. If you have questions, I'll be here to answer them. Feel free to put them in the chat. And I look forward to, having a dialogue with you guys. Thank you.